So,
All right, I'm going to start.
yeah.
All right, well, welcome to the August 28th edition of Update on Ukraine. My name is Jim Dingman. I'm joined with Mark Whittam, Frank Radford, and Ted Cook tonight. I'm first going to start with a piece from Deutsche Welle that was played today. What is the next 6 months of the war like?
Look like for both Ukrainian and Russian forces. Let's bring in Marina Miron. She's an honorary research fellow in the Defense Studies Department's Center for Military Ethics at King's College in London. Marina, it's good to have you with us this evening. So here we are, 6 months into this war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This week, Russian President Putin said we need to boost the size of the military. What does that tell us about how the war has gone so far for Russia, and what does it tell us about where it's headed?
I think it's an interesting question because it is a direct reply to the aid coming from the United States, the recent announcement by Joe Biden's administration. And I think that is Russia's response signaling the fact that the war is not going to end anytime soon. As a matter of fact, perhaps during winter, both Russia and Ukraine will have the chance to regroup and recover to resume operations in spring. But we're in for a long haul here.
And the latest $3 billion U.S. military aid package that was announced this week, I mean, it includes more high-tech weapons, air defense systems, radars, artillery systems. I mean, what does this tell us about how the U.S. now views the Ukrainian military?
I think for the U.S., it's a sign of commitment to Ukraine because in the past weeks, there have been a lot of publications trying to discredit the Ukrainian army, their efforts, especially in relation to the nuclear plant, as well as human rights abuses. So it's a sign that U.S. is still committed to supporting Ukraine and that it believes in the fact that the Ukrainian army can withstand Russian aggression. Moreover, it's important for the Biden administration, given the upcoming elections in November, to set a mark and hopefully to send a message to the allies who have been slowing down their support to Ukraine because of their own national interests, to throw their support behind the Ukrainian army. And this has been shown in recent attacks on Crimea and also the Antonovsky Bridge, which have been successful from a tactical perspective. So the idea is supporting more weapons. However, these weapons are defensive in nature. At least there is hope that the Ukrainian armed forces can stop Russia from advancing on the front lines.
Yeah, and these weapons systems like the HIMARS rocket systems, we know they give Ukraine an increased military punch, a boost, if you will. What about the psychological impact, though, of these weapons deliveries? What's been the impact of these deliveries on both sides?
I think it's very important to look at this war from both perspectives. There is an information dimension to this war. So announcing these deliveries is strategically a mistake because the enemy, Russia, is knowing and is preparing for the fact that these deliveries will take place and will be trying to get information on where the logistic routes are and try to target them.
So you think Marie, you think the U.S. should keep this secret when it is planning to send another $1 billion or $2 billion of weapons to Ukraine?
I believe it would be wiser. But as I said, there are two dimensions to this. There is a psychological dimension, and the morale of the armed forces of Ukraine is crumbling. They are war fatigued, same as the Russians. So it's important to show that the West is still behind Ukraine and that they are getting the support that they badly need. And this reinforces the position of Zelensky as a president who can keep his promise to deliver these weapons to the front. However, there is a downside that the Russians, they should be deterred by hearing that that Ukraine is getting these weapons. However, that also gives them the chance to prepare. They're waiting in anticipation. They know what's coming and what's going to be facing them. And from that perspective, it's not very wise to disclose what exactly is being delivered and in what quantities or what types of weapons.
I want to ask you, we heard a lot at the beginning of this war about the fears of large-scale cyber attacks from Russia in retaliation for Western weapon supplies or for economic sanctions. But, you know, the fears have not been borne out in reality. Have we overestimated Russia's cyber capabilities here?
I think it's quite an interesting question that gets posed quite a lot because everybody was expecting a cyber holocaust. And there have been indeed some isolated cyber attacks which on the battlefield preceded kinetic strikes. However, we haven't seen the full capability of Russia's cyber arsenal. And the reason for that can be that they are lacking these capabilities. However, the more likely scenario is that it's not worth stepping up the stakes and showing their hand, because essentially Ukraine is not the main enemy for Russia, it's a NATO alliance. And so using their secret weapon, their war-winning weapon, because that cyber has been described as such by Russian sources, early on in the Ukrainian war is just a waste for Russia, because there is a fear that these weapons will get out there and will be reverse engineered the same way it happened with Sandworm. So there is no strategic utility as of now. I mean, in terms of military equipment, Russia is not leading a war. Russia is leading a special military operation. It's not committing all of its forces. It's not committing all of its technology to Ukraine. So that same logic applies to cyber, just they are keeping the best for later on when the real danger of confrontation with NATO states looms closer. That's more likely when Russia will try to use its offensive cyber, and probably not against Ukrainian targets, but rather against Western targets.
Yeah, and we certainly hope, of course, that day never comes. Marina Miron from King's College London. Marina, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Residents of a small town in eastern Ukraine are burying their dead after this week's devastating Russian attack on the Ukrainian Independence Day. At least 25 people, including 2 children, were killed by Russian rockets in the small town of Chaplina. Our correspondent attended the funeral of one of the children who was among the victims.
Matvey would have had his first day of school next week in peaceful times. The 6-year-old boy will not live to see this day anymore. The whole neighborhood came to say goodbye.
He was the most precious thing in my life. It's also incredibly sad. For my daughter, there's nothing left. She doesn't even have a home anymore.
Matvey was a quiet boy, his grandmother says. His home was directly across the street from the town's train station. The family was just getting ready for dinner when Russian rockets started to strike the neighborhood. Matvey was playing in the living room when the shelling started, and then he ran over to the kitchen where some other family members were, and that's when the rocket hit and killed the little boy immediately. Russia claimed responsibility for the attack. The military said it wanted to destroy a train that was supposedly carrying Ukrainian soldiers. And they apparently considered the death of Matvey and many others as acceptable collateral damage for their operation. It's the worst tragedy that has ever happened in the small town of Chaplina, the mayor tells us. But it brought the community together.
The parents of the dead children have gone through an incredible amount of stress. We know it's very hard for them to go on with life, but at least we try everything possible to support them.
Besides Matvey, an 11-year-old boy from the same neighborhood died in the attack. The war has already cost the lives of more than 1,000 children. And the 2 boys from Chaplina probably won't be the last.
All right, so that was Deutsche Welle a few days ago. Oh, and let's play this. This looks interesting. This is on the situation in the silos. Um, hold on a second.
My name is Shanna Finkel, and I am a senior in high school from Tampa, Florida, and I'm currently serving as.
The UN says millions of tons of grain still need to be cleared from Ukrainian silos to make room for the new harvest. Shipments resumed through the Black Sea earlier this month after a deal brokered by Turkey lifted a Russian blockade. The flow of grain has helped ease food prices, but exports so far are down by half compared to the same period last year. DW correspondent Matthias Bollinger is in Kyiv. Matthias, why is it proving so difficult to get the grain out of Ukraine despite the deal brokered by Turkey?
Look, the deal foresees that ships that will sail into the Ukrainian ports, get loaded, and then leave the ports again. And before the war, there were something like 5 ships per day that were leaving these 3 ports. Plus, there are also ports that are not operating now, like the port of Mykolaiv. Until now, this number, which is the target, has not been reached because there were not enough ships ready to sail in.
Not enough ships. We understand that that on Saturday, Ukraine's cabinet approved new measures to make the process easier. What exactly did they decide?
Well, it's not exactly that they approved new measures to make the process easier, but there's the hope that the new measures they introduced will have an impact. Basically, they introduced new rules for men. Men are banned from leaving the country since the beginning of the war due to potential mobilization. So men between 18 and 60 cannot leave Ukraine, and the government has approved new rules for men who need to travel for business purposes, and these include sailors. So the hope is that if ships have difficulty finding a crew to sail in, that Ukrainian sailors would be more ready to sail in. But the problem is we also need the ships, and there's also the problem of insurance, which is of course very costly because they're sailing into a war zone, despite all the guarantees. So it's a measure that could potentially ease, but it's probably not the solution to the problem, the complete solution.
I suppose not surprisingly, the war is expected to take its toll on Ukraine's grain harvest this year. How serious is the impact likely to be?
Well, look, Russia is occupying now something like 20% of Ukraine's surface. So this is already territory that will not, there might be harvests and they might be taken by Russia, which is a problem in itself, but this will not be grain, this grain will not be in the Ukrainian stocks. There are battles, there are fields burning. There have been accusations that Russia was setting these fields on fire purposely. Now, this is also not proven, but of course, and there are mines, so there are many fields where this year there won't be any harvest.
DW's Matthias Berlinger in Kyiv. Many thanks, Matthias.
All right, so that is Deutsche Welle again today, talking about the situation in the Ukraine. We're joined with Frank Radford, Mark Whittam, and Ted Cook. Do you guys have any comments of the news that you've been following before I continue?
Thank you.
No.
Well, I could talk about whatever you want, but if there's more news you want to cover,
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
let's do that then.
I agree with that, Frank. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's get into it. Now, I'm going to start with a discussion. This is the last time we did this was on the 20th, so it's about 8 or 9 days ago, actually. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get into some of these issues that have been popping up since that time. What I'm showing you here is a map of the artillery barrages as of the 16th of August. The daily artillery barrages in the front, which ranges from, as you can see, around Kharkiv all the way down to Mykolaiv over here. This is and you guys can correct me, this is about, 1,200, 1,300 kilometers? Somewhere like that. So that's the range and the intensity of artillery on the 16th of August. This is the 17th of August. 16th, 17th.
Much more intense.
More or less, not. I mean, not. There's not really that much of a distinction between the 2 days. It's a little more intensive over here. This is the 18th. Again, not much. You can see what I'm discerning from this is the dispositions of artillery on the Russian side. This, of course, is Russian artillery barrages, and basically little towns and villages attacked by the artillery. And this is the 19th. So it really is not much difference. There's more or less the same kind of intensity of firing.
Really?
Almost, as you can see, there's not much difference in the patterns there. It's just a constant grind, a war of attrition, taking casualties out. If you look at the pro-Russian sources, sometimes they claim, they've killed 100, 200. There's no way to verify that. But whatever it is, the casualty losses, we can be sure that there are constant daily casualties as a result of this kind of bombardment along the front. Now let's turn to the 20th of August. This is just a standard map showing the languages throughout the country. Ukrainian, of course, in these areas, but the areas that have been contested, as we know, have lots of Russian speakers. Look at the Crimea down here, and then this amazing mixture to the south of Odessa over there. Hungarian, Bulgarian, Galgas. Here's Polish over here, etc. All over the place. Excuse me, that's a Chernobyl disaster area. And here,
what is Gagos?
You got me. You got me. I don't know what the hell that is.
Wait, I don't know either.
The first time I ever heard that one.
Yeah, I'm a language guy, but I don't know that one.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here is, essentially the point. This is from The Economist. The point is that they're arguing on the 20th that there was a lot of stories throughout that week that the front has stalled. That the fronts have stalled. And here's a piece. I'm going to diminish it a little bit. This is also from The Economist, that the Russian forces, both of them are digging in, and it's essentially the fighting going on is infantry patrols fighting, small attacks, and artillery duels going on constantly. That's, again, August 20th. Now, what's interesting here is there was a series of the Ukrainians claiming on the 20th special operations raids into the rear of the Russians. Now, whether this is also, and accompanied, of course, with constant barrages into the rear, attacking the logistical base and lines of the Russians. Now, this was a front page in Germany. This was the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock warned that the war in Ukraine could last years, and that Berlin is ready to support Kyiv for the long haul. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. And then, as of the 20th, I'm going to have a lot to talk about the reactor at Zaporizhzhia. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Russian shelling had hit buildings at the station. They were just 100 meters from the reactor building. Water pipelines have been hit. All safety systems at the plant remain operational, and radioactivity levels are normal as of the 20th. This is what's interesting about this little piece. This is a guy. His name is Gorgon. He's a captain. He was volunteered to fight. 46 years old. The guy became fascinated with American air power, particularly A-10s. So what Time magazine did was they devoted a whole piece to essentially this guy contacting a former Air Force general, Breedlove, and talking to him about the necessity to create A-10 transfers to the Ukrainian armed forces. And so what he did was he got together with this businessman down here, and what they did was they created a whole system that was essentially to train Ukrainian pilots in sort of a simulation, you know, I guess a sort of the equivalent of a play center, where they had non-classified trainers for A-10s, and they're taking pilots and teaching them, pulling them off the line and teaching them how to fly A-10s. And I don't know whether they got them or not, but this has been going on since March, April, June. And here's this business person. As you can see, he has keep calm and kill tanks, I guess, or kill troops down here, a little British knockoff piece, keep calm and carry on. And then, of course, he has a color picture of an A-10 with Ukrainian markings. So that's an interesting thing. That was in Time magazine. Now, this is sort of interesting. This is on the 20th. The Russians had decided to knock off supplies on Nord Stream 1, heading down into Greifswald in Germany. So they were beginning to, play games with the oil stream into Germany, which they've been doing throughout, as we know. But this was they decided to knock out 3 days of supply down there into Germany, which would cause a little economic reaction. Here's this British intelligence comment on the 20th. Basically, talking about how the Kherson line is more or less stabilized. I mean, obviously, casualties being undertaken. Limited local assaults, rarely involving more than an infantry company of troops. So that whole situation down in Kherson seems to have been, quote, solidified, if you will, with only company-level attacks going on. Of course, the guys who are in the infantry companies, it's not so easy for them. Now, that's the artillery barrage sort of mapping on the 20th. Again, not much different than what we saw from the 16th to the 20th.
No.
So they're more or less clobbering the same, they've got their fixed-towed weapons and SP guns all sighted in, and they're targeting all these different products. Now, on the 20th also was this incident that happened. Alexander Dugin, his daughter, was in a car. Obviously, I'm pretty sure the car bomb was aimed at him. And as you know, this guy's sort of a reactionary thinker, Greater Russia person. He has extensive impact on the white nationalist movements around the world. And his daughter was killed in the car with a car bomb. And that's the picture of his daughter. She also was a spokesperson, but, I think you guys have seen the picture of him, completely, in shock as his daughter's car is just blown apart, and there he is on the freeway watching the emergency vehicles come in. Now, her assassination, the assassination of her, was claimed by some outfit called the Russian National Republican Army, whoever the hell they are. And as you can see, this is their little manifesto that came out, justifying killing. Obviously, they wanted to kill him, but they killed her instead. They're declaring, they declare the members of the security forces to be collaborators with the usurpers. We outlaw warmongers, robbers, and oppressors of the peoples of Russia. We declare Putin a usurper of authority and a military criminal. Poverty in coffins for some, palaces for others. The essence of his policy, Putin will be destroyed by us. Our purpose is to stop the destruction of Russia and its neighbors. We declare the officials of the government of the Russian Federation and regional administrations accomplices of the usurper. Those who will not resign we shall destroy. And they attacked the businessmen, the oligarchs. We declare the members of the security forces collaborators, military targets, bombing of houses in Russia that brought him to power. And that referring to, of course, if you recall, there were a whole series of still dubious explosions of buildings that they blamed on the Chechens as he was coming to power. And I think there was one particularly, they actually investigated. Some people were arguing, at least in the independent press, that the FSB had blown them up, sort of as a false flag. But who knows what the real story is. Oh. And we call on the soldiers of the Russian army to stop shooting our brothers We call on Russians to join. Now, again, who put this out, whether it's the CIA, the Ukrainian intelligence services, some combination of all, who actually put this manifesto out? Interesting question. Do not know the answer, but I just throw that there because
Oh, thank you. I hadn't seen that. That's
exactly. I figured that'd be something curious to all of us. Now, and here I'm just going to not get into great detail. This is from the Institute for Study of War. There was a drone attack on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters on that date. They took I think they took an Albanian drone, put an 8,000 pound warhead on it, and just boom, sent it off to strike that headquarters. And there are pictures of them doing it. This is again the Institute for Study of War. This is their analysis of what's going on the 20th. Fighting around Kharkiv, encircling the cauldron at Izium and Donetsk, main effort in eastern Ukraine, and then down here is a secondary theater of operations over here near Mykolaiv. Again, the unsuccessful attacks around Izium, Siversk, Bakhmut. Again, we're familiar with those. We'll show them in a minute. This is Western sources analyzing the fighting. And here is the area that they're talking about. Here is Bakhmut, Siversk, all the way down to, again, fighting. We've seen them fighting along these areas constantly for weeks. Same area, just a different kind of bloodshed for whoever's son of a bitch has to carry that out. Here is fighting around Kharkiv, repulsed. Airstrikes, again, these are pro-Ukrainian sources. We'll see something interesting with the statistics, how they estimate about 75% of Russian surface-to-surface missiles have been expended by now in terms of their pre-war inventory. Again, here's the fighting around Kharkiv, and a little more detail with the fighting down to Bakhmut. Again, the same area of fighting we've seen now. Here is a discussion about the fighting around Kherson and Zaporizhia. Essentially, the Russians are continuing to launch different assaults northwest of Kharkiv, and their rear areas are getting bombarded by the Ukrainians. Ammo dumps, headquarters, etc., being hit by the HIMARS and the MLRSs. Same stuff we saw a few days ago, about a week ago, right? And here's the fighting south on the 20th or to Mykolaiv. Same kind of fighting. Remember, there's a large percentage of Russian troops on the south of the Dnieper in the rear here, either rehabilitating, moved down there to prevent a breakthrough. Again, what's going on with them, I don't see. I haven't seen a map since then of that detail that we saw about a week or two or so ago. Again, they're talking about the mobilization going on in the rear. That they're offering $3,300 to $5,000 a month salaries, military contracts down in Donetsk to people to volunteer to fight. And again, essentially this issue of how they're going to implement a referendum in the occupied areas. And here, interesting, now the occupation down in Kherson, Occupation Administration is demanding that Kherson City residents write letters explaining any delinquent rent or utility payments, despite prior Occupation Administration assurances that they will forgive all debt. That's interesting. I didn't know that they'd made that promise to the people they occupied. And here's this. Here's a copy of this drone that hit the Black Sea Fleet, except it was loaded as a bomb. And here's some action on the 20th around Kherson. This is by Chuck Farrar, that SEAL who does a great job. He monitors all this stuff. As you can see, attacks are over here outside of Kherson, constantly battering away at these bridges. And according to this, on that day, they knocked out this bridge over here, this bridge that we've seen attacked and attacked again. A bridge further down here attacked. And this is the HARMS missile that has been used to knock out surface-to-air radar missiles here. This has been used to knock out Russian aircraft and helicopters. Now here's the Zaporizhzhia plant. As you can see, those are several, 4 or 5 of the reactors in front of us. Reactor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over there. Now here's a little more detail. This is the a Ukrainian source. Again, it's not much, since we've been looking at this for weeks and weeks now. There's really not much. Here's the area around Kharkiv. A little bit of diminution of the Russians, but still more or less static fronts along here. Here's Kharkiv. And here Russian thrusts to the east of Kharkiv, going all the way over to this area here, which we thought they were going to do an envelopment over here, and another kind of envelopment here, but there's not much movement. And here's the area around Izium, which is all, look at this, look at the amount of attacks they've launched during that day, the 20th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sized attacks against the frontage of an infantry, of a mechanized brigade, 93rd, and the 80th. I guess it's a mountain unit over here, territorial unit. Now further south, on 20th, again, those of you who've seen these maps, there's not much difference except over here. There's a little more. This area they're pushing forward to the eastern part of Bakhmut, but not that different than what we've seen before. Here's that area that they had conquered near this power plant. So they're sort of expanding towards these roads, which we'll see they will eventually cut off in a day or two from now. And here's the map, again, showing Siversk, down to Soledar, down to Bakhmut. And here is the fighting around Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. And a more detailed map of the Russian fighting southwest and south and southeast of Izium. Yeah, Ted.
No, just I wanted to say, I want to ask actually, does do we think this means that the Russians have given up plans for a major advance this summer? There seems to be no massing of troops in any area where they're going to achieve a breakthrough. They can grind along the whole front. So maybe he has to rebody or reinforce the army to such an extent that he's going to lose the whole summer campaign.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Frank, what do you think about that? That's a question that Ted raises. What do you think, Frank?
Well, we can go into this a little bit more when you've finished, but
okay, good.
Don't forget that there's a big reinforcement coming.
Correct.
90,000. So, and quite a lot of railway traffic indicates they've got substantial T80 reinforcements, and so we'll talk about that later.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, here again on the 20th is the fighting around Izium in greater detail. And again, when you're looking at these Russian sources, like Johan had turned us on, I think I've sent that to everybody.
Yeah.
Those sources that you just have to put the auto translate on, and I haven't really had a chance to really extensively look at them because it looks like it's about 2 hours of viewing a day, and you got to pay attention to it. It's not like you can hear it in the background if you don't speak Russian, but they look like, he was more or less praising these guys as being more or less balanced as much as you can expect. And they're above ground commentary blogs in Russia itself on the military operations. I recommend them. I've watched a few of them. Now here's the fighting, again, going all the way to Siversk. Again, Bakhmut, they're sort of pushing slowly towards Bakhmut. You'll see by the end of these maps sort of little developments. Now here is the situation around Donetsk. And I should add that Frank had mentioned these reinforcements coming. Well, a certain percentage of them are being deployed to reinforce these attacks over here around Donetsk. There's another Third Army Corps that's sort of north of the salient. That's another force being organized, better equipped, by the way. But the flaws in some of these units coming in, these battalions that they've been mobilizing, is that some of them are just company-sized units. So they're not exactly a complete battalion tactical group that they're replacing. It's uneven. It's unclear to who is what and where on all these units. The 3rd Army Corps, which is this new group, new formation they're organizing, they seem to be pretty well equipped. They got T-90 tanks and up-to-date armored personnel carriers. Anyway, this is the area around Donetsk. Again, the 20th. Again, not much more of a dramatic change of what we've seen before. Now, here's the area down from Donetsk to Zaporizhia, over here. I remember that nuclear plant is off the map over here. This is the one they're all fussed up about. It's over here on this estuary here. But again, there's not much difference in the movement here and deployment of troops from what we've seen before. And here's this front around Mykolaiv. Again, not much transformation, except you'll see in greater detail the Ukrainians are systematically bombarding their logistical means of supporting these troops west of the river. And here's down to Mykolaiv. And these particular bridges here, clobbered, they just knocked out, you'll see later, they just knocked out this dam, big hole in it, just a few days ago. You'll see a picture of that toward around the 27th.
They're not breaching the dam, though. That's the point.
They're what?
They're not breaching the dam.
No, they're not. But they have put a hurting in the ability of them to.
If you look at it closely, you'll see that there's a separation, a slight sort of tributary of the dam. That's the bridge they've broken.
Right. And supposedly the Ukrainians have a pontoon bridge across here too, which the Ukrainians, at least the open source pro-Ukrainian sources say, there's not enough. They're basically knocking out the ability of them to keep these guys well supplied with units of fire. So
well, actually, there's a little bit more than that.
Go on.
They've got some heavy barges that were designed meant to lift gravel and sand. They're actually trying to stitch them together, and they're using the cover of the bridge itself. So they're building it underneath the Antonov Bridge.
Over here.
So that means they're difficult to target with HIMARS, and eventually they'll be pretty sturdy. But again, once it's in place, it'll be targetable. But being as it's made of wood, and if it's as sturdy as what it could be, it may actually be relatively easy to repair. And since it's constantly moving, they can probably move it such that it's difficult to really get precise targeting. They might be able to at least start somewhat, start the logistics flow a little bit better than they are now.
All right. So let's turn to the 21st. So here is again. This is let me diminish this. This is the Institute for the Study of War. They're basically talking about the same kind of attacks all in line. Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Avdiivka is over here. Avdiivka, and Bakhmut, as we know, is off the map here. So basically, again, attacks on those areas, Avdiivka and Bakhmut. And here they raise questions. This is again pro-Ukrainian, this source, that they're facing problems because of their reliance on importation of Western spare parts for their aircraft. You know, the kind of things we've been seeing come up surprisingly in all these different studies about whole, the sort of supply chain of weapons, weapon systems, particularly avionics and electronics, into Russia. So they're talking about how that is a problem for them in repairing the aircraft. Now, again, not much change on the 22nd, no big device, same kind of patterns there. And here is again, I'm going to skip that. The same, more or less the same area of constant grinding, fighting on the 21st. Same areas, not much difference there. Same areas along Donetsk front. And here we have not much difference here down to Mykolaiv. Now, what happened here was interesting. There was a study that was released by a European source about they had gotten some more accurate idea of all the different concentration camps, if you will, in the Russian sectors. And so they actually had located several dozen of them, the filtration centers, where they're sort of taking people from the areas they occupy and, quote, sanitizing them or dispersing them throughout Russia. And they did a study where Yale did a study with the State Department where they have now located a whole nexus of them in that particular study. Well over 20, if I recall, in the rear areas. Now, here is this German system that had come into play here, an anti-aircraft system that was delivered to the Ukrainians. It began to be coming into operational use in more tense way on this particular day, the 21st. And they were also talking about, and this is sort of interesting, the amount of where are these Russian missiles hitting. So the point about this is that this particular story, 1 in 20 of them hit a military facility. All right. They're mainly hitting civilian targets. And they also did an interesting battle assessment. Remember, they were making a big deal about that Crimea attack on Saki airfield where they knocked out with ATACMS all these different Russian aircraft and helicopters. And here is the revetments where the helicopters and the aircraft were knocked out. And it's interesting, the MG-140 ATACMS is only a 500-pound bomb, basically. So its effectiveness, it certainly can knock out an aircraft. I wonder, the ordnance, it's an interesting question to figure out how the actual tactics of the fighting to knock out those bridges is going on, because Frank mentioned something interesting that they're trying to build, the Russians are building a go-around by bringing barges in place. I'm sure it's sort of like, it reminds you of what happened to the Vietnam era war in 65, 66. All those operations to knock out the bridges that were important for the logistics of the DRV into the south. Now here is the S-300. They're using that as a surface-to-surface missile. And those of you who know anything about, S-300 has always been viewed as a particularly threatening surface-to-air missile in NATO planning, and now it's being used as a surface-to-surface missile. Now, what I wanted to show here, this is a Italian fascist, basically Matteo Salvini, who is the basically a operative receiving funding, a political right-wing sort of neo-fascist figure in Italy, receiving money from Zargard. And Zargard is a sort of probably an upfront, not barely disguised conduit for influence money to be sent to right-wing movements that are sympathetic to Russia. So he is a former member of the Italian Parliament. I think he is in the Italian Parliament right now. And this is what he wears when he's sitting there voting in Italy, in Rome. He's he has a T-shirt of good old Putin there. And that's to raise the question of, sometimes when I listen to some of my colleagues on the left who are defending the Russians also so uncritically, well, here's an example of a little bit of the complications of it. That Zargard has actually organized something modeled after the Comintern, except it's called the Alintern. And what it is to organize people who are essentially sort of a commentator on the right wing. It includes the National Front of Marine Le Pen.
Jeez.
And so this is sort of interesting because I listen to all these people screaming and yelling about, the Azov Battalion and all that, and the coup against the regime of Yanukovych, but they always tend to ignore this kind of stuff. The money that's being used for, and when you put it into the context of what just happened with that raid on the African Socialist People's Party in Tampa, Florida, and St. Louis, well, it just gives you the range of sophistication of the Russian influence operations. That they have the smarts to essentially not give too much money, but I think it was about maybe $20,000, $25,000 to this group that is homegrown American Pan-African nationalist group. No doubt about it. But at the same time, they're sitting there organizing all these different populist right-wing parties into a big network that they're funding. And they have 16 right-wing populist parties that they help give money to. So I figured that'd be a nice little thing to throw in the mix there.
Just as my opinion,
Yeah.
if it's copying Comintern, in my opinion, was the most brilliant organization for espionage and subversion of from 1919 to 1989. I know it actually changed its colors in 1943, but pretty much stayed the same.
Cominform, yeah, it became Cominform.
Right. It was there's nothing comparable to it until the CIA kind of got its act together. But while it existed, it was absolutely brilliant, no question.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Alan Turn is a mere shadow of what that did. Now here's this is this dam. This is that dam that we were talking about earlier. This is that dam. If we were looking at that maps around Kherson, it's usually further to the east of the map. That's where this is a picture of that dam up the river there. Up the Dnieper. And this is sort of interesting. It shows you how it's a difficult target to, quote, knock out, because you don't want to unleash the dam for obvious reasons, the water. But what they're showing there is the photographs of the actual hits on the highway parts, which that doesn't seem that difficult for the Russians to fill in. But the Russians are constantly having to deal with this. And here, look at the concentration of the shots right off the access bridges, the bridges that's coming down into the mainland, if you will, around northeast of Kherson. And those are the areas of the shots that were fired by the HIMARS, more than likely. Constantly going after this target, by the way. Again, here's this Iris weapon. Here's the Saki airfield. And this is the artillery barrages on the 21st. Keep in mind what I showed you. Not much different. Frankly, I don't even know if they changed this damn map that much. That could be another reason why it's that way.
Xerox sale. It's a lot quicker that way.
Yeah, right, exactly. You don't have to go through any detail. Now, here is the fighting. This is, I believe, south of Bakhmut. I'm not sure. But you can see this is the pro-Russian maps. These guys are making limited aims. Now, here's the 22nd. Again, we can go pretty quickly over the Institute for the Study of War Information. Not much really great differences in terms of what's happening here. In terms of the fight. The fighting is, again, more or less predictable. Same areas. We'll see this throughout as we go to the end of this. Although here they launch multiple assaults in the Mykolaiv-Kherson line. This is, again, the 22nd. Several villages were attacked around Mykolaiv that day by the Russians. And they reported shelling on the 22nd of the Enerdar thermal plant, which is 5 kilometers from the Zaporizhzhia power plant. And they showed the damaged water lines and a stalled car with a deceased driver after Russian forces repeatedly shelled. In other words, they're fighting around this. They're shelling these thermal plants that are near Zaporizhzhia, which are not good for the health of that nuclear facility. And here they're reporting a general mobilization will occur on the 1st of September in Luhansk. This is before the declaration several days later by the Russians. And they're talking here about the amount of troops, although these units are not necessarily filling out. They're not battalion size. This is only 280 guys who are estimated to be the planned volunteers. Only got 140 as of the 22nd of August. So these guys, these units that are coming in there that are part of this great massive mobilization, it's not exactly, they're not getting the creme de la creme of the manpower pool that they want. We'll see that changes with this mobilization order a few days ago. And what's interesting about this is, look at this. Now we've looked at these, this is where they're getting all these volunteer units. And it's shifting further west.
Yeah.
All right? Because if you recall, a lot of this was coming in from these areas initially, right?
Right.
And here are units, these are areas that are given, but we weren't seeing as much of this area here, European Russia, being forced to, send volunteer units. Well, that's changing as of the 22nd. And that is looked on by some analysts. Again, we can take that with a grain of salt. They're saying, aha, they're now going to have to go into the areas that they weren't tapping for volunteer troops, as opposed to these areas, which are some of the poorest in the country. The class dimension of fighting unpopular war.
Right.
And that they could be making the same kind of errors and mistakes with bringing in these guys that occurred during the Vietnam War with the United States. That's the implication.
Yeah.
Now, here is the bridge action on the 22nd of August. So this is the Antonovsky Bridge here. And they're hitting it. And also these bridges along the Imhulets River are starting to get hit again. And here's the forward edge of the battlefield. So the units that are across the bridge, because they're getting screwed up with their ammunition supply and general supplies, are not necessarily making great, robust advances towards Mykolaiv. Here's the situation at 2000 hours that day on the 22nd. They're getting hit with attacks in the rear. Ammo dumps are being destroyed. And so are Russian troop concentrations, but mainly ammo columns coming to try to reinforce the Russians. And this is sort of interesting. I found this interesting. This is a anti-drone device that the Ukrainians are displaying. They got from the Germans.
Jesus.
Right? And that'll knock out drones. Or I think the Germans or the Swedes, but someone like that. Now here, they finally are catching up with this woman who they claim is the woman who placed the bomb that killed Durgin's daughter. But what they're doing here is they're refuting this as a bogus Ukrainian ID card. They're saying it's a made-up card by the Russians. And that woman on the left is supposedly the Matahari that placed the bomb. This woman here. This person supposedly escaped across the border into either Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia, one of those countries.
With her 12-year-old daughter, apparently.
Right. And here is Dugin himself. And so here they're finding that, compared again to the kind of studies we did about Normandy, which were also a lot of abandoned vehicles, by the way, armored vehicles by the Germans, but 35% of their tanks are abandoned. Of the overall amount of losses, 35% of them are abandoned. Now here is, again, the fighting, again, on the Kharkiv front as of the 22nd. I'm not going to blow it up. It's not that different than what we just saw. Same over here. Not much difference. Except the only thing I could say is there obviously a conscious attempt to encircle Kodyma, which is right here. Let me blow it up. So you can see that the Ukrainians are trying to press from the north and south to encircle this small village, which will then put them astride this highway south of Bakhmut. Here's the fighting around.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Here's the fighting around Izium, again, on the 22nd. Not much difference from what we saw before. Here's Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Siversk, Solidar, down to Bakhmut. A little closer to Bakhmut here. And, you know, constant, little sort of minor, probably encirclements of platoon size or company size formations that we see. Again, constant military fighting of a different level, low level, but nevertheless for the poor guy, as I say, and you know, the guy walking point, it doesn't matter if it's high level, low level, medium level, whatnot.
That doesn't matter.
Now here is again a wider picture of the whole front. Here's around Izium. This is again the 22nd of August. All right. Not much difference. These again, who knows how accurate these little arrows are, what they really indicate. Here's the front down to Donetsk. And interesting, to the south and north of Advika, which is a pretty well fortified area. Most of the Russians are attempting to hit north and south of it. And here's the fighting front down to Zaporozhye, which is here. Again, not much movement. 22nd of August. Down to Zaporozhye. And here is to the Mykolaiv area. Again, not much difference, as we've seen before. And this is interesting. This is another, again, the artillery barrage map. Again, not that much different than what we've seen before. There actually are subtle differences. They do this every day. It's not the same damn thing and superimposed, but the differences are slight. And here's a estimate of the losses, that their Russian losses are triple that of the Ukrainians, and double that and on the par. So most of the time the fighting is, now what's occurred after this big spike is that the weapons fighting losses there, look at that, they're sort of going down in a way.
Yeah.
In these little surges of equipment. Now here's the 23rd. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this. These are, okay, this is interesting. The Russians are bringing Ukrainian children to Russia and having Russian families adopt them. And I'm sure the Ukrainians will cry genocide, cultural genocide. Again, the maps here, not much difference in the fighting. Same here, not much difference. Same around Kharkiv. And here is again, this expansion of the troops further west into areas they weren't mobilizing for before. Remember, the red is multiple units coming out of these areas.
Right.
Now here is the situation on the 23rd around Kherson, Mykolaiv. Here is a Russian attack going on against Mykolaiv. And here's these, again, a bridge along here knocked out. Another bridge here supplying the troops knocked out. You know, the Russians are constantly getting clobbered. Assassinations going on in the rear. Let's see. Oh, no, that's it. Now, and here in the last 6 months, the Russians have fired 750 missiles from the Crimea, which explains, you know, when you watch these pictures of the Ukrainian troops in those areas, they're very extraordinarily ecstatic when they're coming down into the Crimea to quote, re-liberate it, if you will.
Right.
And here's intelligence, British intelligence. Russia has started moving. These are the barrages you're talking about,
Right.
Frank.
Right. Yeah.
And here's the damaged Antonovsky Road Bridge. And so they're obviously trying to not have to rely on a foreign ferry operation. Now here is the, these are more sort of, here are UAVs that have been used, that were prominent in use in operations against Russians that day. HIMARS, more HIMARS coming in. This is an announcement that day of a big military package to the Ukraine, $3 billion. And again, here's another. This is a Russian warhorse. Their Orden 10 UAV battlefield recon. And here's this 152 millimeter laser guided round. Oh, interesting. I didn't know those weapons had laser guided rounds. And this is the heavy artillery piece, standard heavy artillery piece of the Russian and the Ukrainian troops. And here's again more fighting around logistics and the overall barrage pattern that day. Again, not dissimilar from what we've seen before. And for some reason they went back into this again. Again, I'm going to skip through this. There's not much more difference than what we've seen before. But here this is the stuff to pay attention to now. Here on the day of the 24th is when you start to have these pictures. This is the fire south of the reactors going on. Here are the reactors, and this area had caught fire. Approximately south of them. Scary stuff for people in Europe. So here's the report. Reported burning south of the reactor. This is what they're showing here. And the town of Enhardar has provided accommodations for the power plant employees and their families, etc. And this is this Norwegian Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System getting play that day on the 24th. Another surface-to-air missile system brought in. Developed by Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace. I never heard of those guys. I guess it's a Norwegian company. And Raytheon.
It's apparently better than the Iris-T, the German one.
Ah, interesting.
But they're all good.
Again, so these kind of weapons come in there and they can influence the fighting.
Everybody's in the business.
Now here is the Stugna P anti-tank guided missile system. It's obsolete but in action. And, any of you have been in cold weather and been out there with somebody, you go into the spoon position when you're trying to keep warm with their sleeping pads in a foxhole. Now, this is significant because here's where you get into the political will issue. Look at the prices here of electricity per megawatts in Europe right now, as of the 24th. I'm going to show you a map that will contrast this rather sharply. 600.
That's a very good map.
Yeah, isn't that? And look at the prices for per capita for Germany, France, etc. And here's the positions around the 24th of August around Sivyrsk, Slavyansk, Bakhmut. I'll show that. And here you're seeing offensive operations on the 23rd that we already saw. So I already had that there. Company-sized operations going on along these lines. And here is fighting over in that area, which we saw. These are Russian maps. Ukrainian counterattacks stopping this thrust that would go off to Mykolaiv. Again, not much difference from what we've seen before. Now here's the 25th. Now, what's going on here is, again, more international attention, the 25th, more international attention to what's going on against those nuclear plants. And on Thursday, we had some scary stuff happen. One of the plants was disconnected from the power grid. Now, what that did was it immediately, they lacked a coolant to keep those reactors under control, so it was a dangerous situation. Two power units, the station's two working power units were disconnected from the network. And see, they're talking about what could happen. Is only due to backup electricity kicking in that the Zaporizhzhia plant was able to operate safely. So this came close to a problem here.
Yeah.
For everybody. Again, pictures of the reactors. And here they're talking about power outages around Russian-occupied Ukraine, mainly in the north. Now here is pictures of the confirmation of fighting vehicles near the reactors. APCs in close proximity to reactors 4, 5, and 6 on the 25th of August. Everybody see that?
Yeah. Didn't they say there are two other reactors are active, the other ones are shut down at the moment?
Yeah.
There are 6, I think, two. And I'm not sure which of the two, but they seem to be near, as I saw one of the maps, I think it showed they're near one of the active reactors.
Right. Yeah, you're going to see now this is something that obviously freaked out everybody. They were spending a lot of time of it. Now, here again, the good old Turkish UAVs being used in operation.
Pocket size.
And the question of how they're delaying referendums in the areas they occupy. People thought they were going to do that now. Now, I think that's a repeat of that one I showed a little earlier. But 2 reactors were scrammed for the first time. And they now depend, as of the 25th, they were depending solely on backup emergency generators to provide electrical power to their cooling systems. Reactors 5 and 6 are reported to have been placed in SCAM to reduce strain on electric generators. So I assume that's they're basically offline to some extent, because you can't you have to always have juice going into them.
Or even after you've shut it down, you still got to keep that stuff cool. That's what, in Fukushima, that's what ultimately caused a lot of the problems. They couldn't really shut them off because they lost they couldn't pull the rods out. Then they couldn't keep it cool. Then they found out after a while that the internal mechanisms have been destroyed. And then, of course, they melted down. So then you were stuck with everything. So you had serious trouble with Fukushima. At Chernobyl, it was the reactor, because of the explosion in the reactor dome itself, through mishandling of the test, they ended up then blew the roof off. That's what happened to them. And so then that was just leaking all the radiation right into the atmosphere with no containment.
Yeah, right. Now, what's interesting here is there's a little diminution of the average of shelling. It's down by about 15% on this day, which is the 25th. Again, looks like to me the diminution was up here around Kharkiv, but a little less thick around here, the Siversk, Bakhmut, and then it turns into Donetsk. A little less severe in there. Now here's the 26th. And here's this bridge. I think this is the Antonovsky Bridge. Oh no, this is the bridge on the Imhulets River. The Imhulets River is right here. This is a bridge that was hit. Here's the Imhulets River. Here's this bridge here, Dalivka, Kapika. Anyway, it got hit by HIMARS and disrupted. This is a pretty actually good overhead map of the reactor. And here you see the areas that they around here, the different stations.
Yeah.
And
Again, multiplicity is the key to keeping reactors safe. Having backup to the backup to the backup, and they've had the problem is they have no backup crews now.
right.
These poor bastards have been out there months on end, and not going home to their homes and not having lives and not having vacations. I have no idea how you could man these things. Just everything I know about the reactors at Chernobyl and at Fukushima tells me that the key is the personnel. And these poor guys just can't be in a good condition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now Forbes had a piece that day that the Russians had lost about 1,200 pieces of equipment, and that this was worth $16 billion or $17 billion.
Oh.
And they're not including ammo.
12,000.
12,000. Excuse me, 12,000 and 16 worth around 17 million in value. Billion, yeah, right. Excuse me. Now here is Mykolaiv getting hit by S-300s, and that's a picture of the bridge at Daryevivka that was clobbered by the Ukrainians, and they're hitting all these different bridges across the Dnieper. And again, they go back to this picture of these reactors and the fire south of it on the 24th, which has freaked out people in Europe, obviously. And here is another picture from that day. Precision strikes hitting the M14 bridge over here. And again, I will skip this. These are the maps. Again, not much difference. And this is sort of interesting. Bilateral aid in dollars to the Ukrainians from different countries. And this is basically, you can see, of course, the importance of the United States. $45 billion.
Yeah.
And there's no one else that comes near us. I mean, it's essentially the $45 billion. I think when you add that all up, it exceeds all these numbers from everywhere else in the world. And allows the other countries, like, look at how small Germany was.
Yeah.
3.2 billion. And again, this is a map of the barrages.
What's your fire map?
And here you got the fire maps. Again, the rear over here, they're hitting Luhansk. And these the ranges of the HIMARS missiles. And here's a sector. This is around Izium on the 25th. Again, this is not. Again, when you look at these maps, there's not much difference in change. Here's around Bakhmut. Here's Bakhmut. And let's go down here. And this is around Donetsk. Here, that's. Now, it's a fighting. I think this is around. This is up there near Siversk. Oh no, different area. Luhansk Oblast, Donetsk Oblast. Now this is the Antonovsky Bridge. Look at there. That's a hit that day. On the 26th. Good shooting, as they say. And here's the 27th. Now, this is the first reference. The Third Army will deploy in Ukraine and meet ad hoc combat units coming in to constitute that corps. And what's interesting about them is they're training, that Third Army Corps that's being formed is being trained with much more modern Russian equipment. Okay, I'm going to skip these. These are maps that deal with the flow of fighting. And here's their problem. They've got an army basically.
Could you just go back to that one?
Which one?
The previous one, because it's got some interesting stuff. The information on the Third Army Corps. I don't know what I'm doing.
What, here?
No, the Third Army Corps, the information on the Third Army Corps that's coming in.
Yeah, here's the beginning of it. Talking about how they're equipped with BMP-3s, T-80 AZMs, and T-90 medium tanks.
The where it says Baron Korff,
yeah,
he was a key rear guard guy in the Napoleonic period before Moscow.
So they called it. They named it after him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Holding the fort for the nation, for the patriot. Patria.
Yeah. All right. So here they're talking about the Third Army Corps and how it's being formed, and it looks like it's being divided into two groups of forces, and I guess this sort of be quote a reinforced Army Corps in traditional modern Russian. What I found significant was the effect that it's getting good equipment, T-90Ms, T-80 BVMs, and BMP-3s, and the latest assault rifle variant. Units from, like, for example, Northern Ossetia, they enter battle with older equipment. And they're getting, and as you can see, we see these pictures of the railroad system going full speed. And here is these are the maps that accompany what's going on the 27th. All right. Now, and then we just showed this. How are they going to supply these guys? That's that picture of that dam up there we showed earlier. And then all these bridges along the Amulets, and here's you got the Antonovsky Bridge. So they're clobbering them all over the place. They have a pontoon bridge over here. And the morale of 42nd has supposedly declined. And that's fighting, that's down to Bakhmut. This is directly north of that area, northwest of Bakhmut. Now they hit the bridges again on the 27th. Hit them with various precise missiles. Knocked out ammo dumps. And here's this area again. They were these different areas were burning on the 27th. And here's an interesting little shot. They blew up a collaborator in the at Berdyansk. This guy had been a police officer in the Ukrainian police, then he basically defected, and he became head of security for the Donetsk Republic, and they blew the guy up. That's a car bomb going off.
Interdicted, they use it.
Yes. Now, the 25th, look at this. This is interesting. Gas prices hitting European fertilizers and cutting production. So look here.
Can you make that a bit bigger?
Yeah, I will. So look at the different countries here. The Netherlands. Ammonia lines down. Nitrate. Okay. Ammonia production in Belgium curtailed by 35%.
Why are these things happening?
Well, this is the effect of the Russians playing games on energy supply.
Because natural gas is an input to these fertilizers.
Correct.
Yeah, so the Europeans have some of the elements, not all of them.
Right. But it's also, it's the supply chain. I don't pretend to be an expert on the gas, all these derivatives from the importation of gas, but it's pretty clear. Look at this: nitrogen fertilizer production down in Poland as a result of this. Ammonia line down. No, I'll skip that one. Now this is sort of interesting. This is a sort of agglomeration of the losses of troops, planes and UAVs, missile batteries, anti-aircraft vessels, and tanks and APCs, artillery pieces. Now here's a good contrast. I'm going to knock this down a little bit. Look at the prices for electricity in 2017 in Norway. In Sweden. For megawatts, 28.6 euros. Now it's 80 euros. In Finland, 30.9 euros. Now it's 200 euros. In Germany, look at that. 30.9 euros, now it's 401 euros. Poland, 35, 239. And look at the countries closest to Russia, or closest to Ukraine over here. 41 before, 5.546 now. Italy. Oh, whoa. Now you can see, look at the Italians. 44.9, 656. France, 34.4, 489 for France. Similar, look at that. Netherlands, 35 to 385. Belgium, 36 to 4. So that's political pressure big time. Look at Denmark, 28.7 to 401. So there we see, political economic pressure real time right in front of us. How it'll affect will, who knows? And again, the amount. Okay, I just threw that. I saw it. Oh, let's see, U.S. defense spending and overall spending is greater than China, India, UK, Russia, France, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea. We already know that. And here they're estimating they've expended 45% of their precision missile arsenal. Now this is sort of interesting. This is a little map of SAM radar interference. I didn't find more about this. I'll have to look. I sort of found that fun because here they're showing a grid around Rostov on Don of SAM radar interference. Again, I just threw that out. I said, that looks cool. Now, here is look at the importation of gas into Germany from Russia. Compared to April, down here, it's 9% in August as opposed to 34% in April. So they have indeed knocked it down considerably. They've increased the amount they're getting from, where's that? Sonstig Lander. And, actually from Norway. And they've diminished the amount they're getting a little bit more from the Netherlands. But basically, look at the difference from Russia. They've knocked it down by almost 3 to 4 times. Easily 3.5 times they've knocked it down. As of just now. And I thought I would show you this. This is the U.S. saying a big fuck you to China. They sent 2 combat vessels through the Taiwan Strait yesterday. Basically went through the USS Antietam and the USS Chancellorsville. Sailed through the Taiwan Strait for freedom of seas, operations. Now here is another little fun thing going around the plant. Russia has increased attacks on Nikopol. They launched a strike against residential areas of Nikopol. This attack used a restricted airbase adjacent to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant to mask the aircraft's attack in retreat. Unwilling to risk a Russian aircraft crashing into the nuclear plant, Ukrainian air defense was unable to engage the attacking helicopter. So that's sort of interesting. And remember, and I don't know if you saw this last week, but somebody actually argued that in the West that this would be an Article 5 incident if, in fact, the power plant is breached. Did any of you see that?
Yeah, we saw that one. Yeah.
What is Article 5?
Well, that's war.
Yeah.
That's war. That's World War III. Article 5 is it triggers the use of forces in NATO. Now,
where the attack is on one is all it's an attack on all.
Well, yeah, because you're going to have nuclear radiation going all over the damn place.
How about that? Yes.
And into NATO. Now, this is sort of interesting. Just a little domestic sideline. I found this interesting. As of today, this is the Secretary of State of the Secretary of State running for the Democratic ticket for Colorado. She is pointing out that essentially we are on the verge of losing our democracy, given the fact that you have all these oddball folks running for Secretary of State. There are 27 Secretary of State contests this year, and all of them have policy outcomes that would be quite detrimental to honest elections. So you have in Arizona, Mark Fincham. He's now the Republican nominee for Secretary of State. He was a stolen election guy. In Michigan, Christina Carmo, who basically claimed to have witnessed voter fraud as an election observer, she is the Republican Party's choice to be Secretary of State. In Pennsylvania, the Republican gubernatorial nominee, Doug Mastriano. It's funny, Doug Mastriano is a guy, I think he's a military historian. I've seen his name. I think he wrote something about some Pennsylvania-type military history. But anyway, he's a far-right lawmaker who led the brazen attempt he was down there in the operations prior to the January 6th attempt to take over the Capitol. Then you got Pam Anderson, a former county clerk, who prevailed in her party's primary with an election conspiracy theorist, indicted for tampering with election equipment. So she's running to take anything out of this. But this is one of these women. This is a humdinger over here. Tina Peters was indicted on charges that she directed a breach of voting machines. She's now the they rejected her, thank God. But the Republican voters rejected her bid to be the next state Secretary of State in Colorado. All right. But, she's someone who received the backing of President Trump. And here today, on the 28th, here's these various attacks going on against bridges, against ammo dumps, etc. Today. This is fighting along I believe this is around the Mykolaiv area. And then we get to this Third Army Corps being formed that was referenced earlier. How to evaluate these troops. This Third Army Corps is getting better equipment as opposed to the other units that are being formed. But that's just a little bit of the military information. Let me just end with the discussion of the political information.
No, wait. Go back to the
Military.
Go back.
Yeah.
Wait. Go back to the map of the artillery. That makes this all worthwhile. That last artillery. Look at that.
A little
That is
less.
remarkable. Not a little less.
Yeah.
That is a that is completely different than everything that preceded it.
Right.
That's correct.
So clearly, everything is culminating in this massive reduction in artillery strikes. If that was today, or apparently that's today.
That's today. That's today.
Well, look at it. I mean, obviously, there's a massive difference there.
Yeah.
So
this is what I was thinking about, Frank, when I was asking my question, because I'm not ignorant, like many of us, and anybody who studied the Second World War in the Far East, in the Eastern Front in Europe. Well, I'm so used to like First Guards Tank Army, 30,000 troops killed in over a 3-week period, hundreds of tanks blown up, and hundreds more coming after them. All those massive sides. The number of troops engaged in the whole structure of the attacks is completely different. It's northern France, and I can't quite understand. Is that the pattern that they're now set? They've given up the idea of the deep penetration, their whole doctrine, or can they not just do it? They just can't do it. If they've given up the doctrine, that's one thing. But if they're actually incapable of doing it, there's a lot less to worry about it to fill the gap that we used to worry about in the 1970s and 80s.
Well,
a bit of an army. I'm not making a comparison between that, but I'm just saying. Let's talk about that for a minute. Yeah.
Well, have we finished the actual slide?
Yeah, we have.
All right. This actually is indicative of something that is of great consequence, because as Ted's saying, this is not the Eastern Front that we love and cherish about the Second World War.
I've been following Kharkov very carefully with all the experiences of that, just for example. And boy, so
right.
Where's the army? You sort of wonder. Yeah.
Right, but on the other hand, and I don't want to sound like Alex, but I'm afraid I am not. I'm not convinced, and this is purely me. Who am I? But I'm not convinced that this attritional geostrategic posture, strategic posture that Ukraine seems to have adopted, based on what's coming to it. But I suspect, and I've always suspected, that the United States, since it's the main supplier, but NATO as well, is starting to be content in the military sense with this stalemate.
Yeah.
And that does not work. It does not work, because winter is coming, and all those slides rightly point out that, if you listen to the BBC, the Brits are in dire circumstances.
Yeah.
And, if they're bad, we know that Bulgaria, Hungary, and Italy may start to fold as this fatigue it's not fatigue, it's actually stress on the economic side. And unless Ukraine does something, I mean, this counteroffensive that's been touted so much, I'm starting to see, this is my opinion, problems that are NATO-centric. Our armies are not geared for the offense, and that's the problem. And all right, we continue with this, or what are we doing?
Yeah, go on. Keep saying what you're saying.
Yeah, well,
I'm listening.
Yeah, they're not geared to do this kind of action. Now, what we're looking at, or so far from the Russian side, I would equate to World War I, and that is the trench raid.
Yeah.
That's what, large trench raids around about a company size element goes across.
Right.
Now,
The casualty causes. They're things you did because you had nothing else to do.
More than that.
But before the big, I'm just going to say for a second, Frank,
Right.
Yeah, so before the big offenses, before the attack on Verdun, or before the attack on the Somme, they just attacked everybody. They had to do something every day. So they were going out every day, and people were getting killed every day.
No, it's more than that. It's more than that.
Okay.
You have to psychologically prepare soldiers to cross no man's line. And somebody has to do it. The secret Sassoons and the rest of them, they did that. And it took a lot of courage. It takes guts to do this. And if you don't do it, you're more than happy to sit inside a trench line and wait till somebody relieves you. And that is what's going on the Ukrainian side. And this is a stagnation that it is a massive problem to inculcate that idea of offense into an army. And what the Russians are doing is, it doesn't matter actually that if their troops are untrained. Why? Because if this is an attritional situation, it takes time for anything to happen. So they've got plenty of time to introduce these soldiers into what they're going to do eventually, which is go into another offensive. And that should not be allowed. So we keep saying on this side, oh, look, they're not very well trained. Oh, look, but we're not doing anything on this side. In other words, the Ukrainians have not been showing any results on the ground in terms of taking back territory. They've talked about the Kherson thing. It's not good enough. They are not. And the essence of the problem is actually, you're not going to like this. You're not going to like this at all. The essence of the problem, and this stems from Vietnam onwards, is we have too good an NCO Corps. Our NCO Corps is too good. We do not have officers leading from the front. And that's what the Russians do, to their credit. They take officer casualties. I'm sounding like Alex. I don't want to, but if you go into an attritional mode, it's wrong. You've got to take casualties with officers, and the officers have to think in terms of that. And you're not going to like this bit either. The prime example of when uniformed people who are well-trained, well-paid, and very skilled at what they do and have experience, but don't get the thing done, is Uvalde. Uvalde actually is somewhat like our army. Especially the officer corps. They don't do it, and that they don't get in harm's way. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's quite clear to me that what we've done is allow the NCO Corps from Vietnam onwards to basically take over the war on the front, the tactical level. It's an unforgiving place, but if you got to keep casualties down, you let them do it. It almost becomes a 9-to-5 job, and that's what's happening to the Ukrainians. They've got to do the hard thing, which is, and this is, by the way, easy said, easily said.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. It's easily said. We're old men in our comfy chairs, right? But those guys, I'm sounding like the professor on the Western Front.
I know. Back in the castle around the table with the big map on it. And
yeah, right. It's like, okay.
And telling the orderly to bring in the cognac.
Yeah, but telling the kids in the class, it's like, you guys have got to do this. It's like, and they all do, and none of them come back. But unfortunately, if you're gonna lose this, this is the way to do it. You do what an attritional thing, and this thing lasts. If they're talking about years, forget about it. It's not going to go for years. Zelensky is going to be pressured into doing something by maybe January, February. And because the West cannot, and it's proven that the West, democracies can't handle this. The United States couldn't handle Vietnam. The United States couldn't handle the forever war of Afghanistan, where we're losing a guy every year. Yeah. I mean, why? It's wild. It's unreal. But Ukraine has to take this into their own. They have to take charge, and do the nasty. And that is, they just got to. I mean, that's my take on it. I mean, by the way, the other example is Cambrai, again, World War I. Yeah. You start using a weapon system that hasn't been seen before. You got a game changer, but the other side adapts bloody quick. The Germans adapted quickly to the use of tanks in World War I, and that applies to just about everything. Use gas for the first time. If you don't have it integrated properly, it doesn't work. And then eventually, you got Bruckmüller getting it right, Bruckmüller getting it somewhat right. And then, of course, the stormtroopers eventually. But we have precision weapon systems right now that can be used properly in a well-planned operation. But if you don't do it, they're basically one-shot deals, because the Russians will extemporize. They will come back and stop these weapon systems from being used. to their best effect. And that is a problem, because if you're going to win, you got to do it with weapon systems and precision munitions that have not been adapted to by the enemy. And again, we're losing on that front, because it's as clever as it looks with the HIMARS hitting these dumps. All you have to do if you're the Russians is disperse these dumps. And then if you disperse them properly and use these conscripts to guard them, right? Well, every time you fire $100,000 missile and you hit something that blows up maybe, 50,000 worth of stuff, you're essentially losing. And that's because dispersion is the obvious thing to do. You couldn't do it with a 40-mile convoy because that was it. Yeah. But you've got all these oblasts that you actually do control. You can disperse this crap. Now, the fact that it's taken them this long to get their act together is, well, that's Russia for you. But don't count on it for any length of time. And as far as these special forces operations, don't count on that being working very, very much longer either. I mean, by the way, I mean, you remember Vietnam, the classic thing, as I recall, is Ban Me Too at the Air Force Base. North Vietnamese company disguised themselves as South Vietnamese, walked in and destroyed 70 aircraft.
Yeah.
So don't count on the Russians not being able to do the same kind of trick too, as the Ukrainians are doing. So, that'll bite you. The time factor is against Ukraine. It's against them very badly, and they need to act now. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's hard. That's
well, I think I put Jim to sleep.
No, Jim's there. Jim's there somewhere. No, but see, the thing is, we all want. I'm just so overwhelmed by the, it's a cruel and hard mindset of a military historian looking at comparing wars over time. I mean, we were all so stunned that the Russians lost more in the first couple of weeks of this war, or first couple of months of this war, than they lost the whole time in Afghanistan. That was, to me, shocking. And then you realize they lost more than Vietnam. They may have lost more than we lost in Vietnam over a 20-year period. That's probably not true. Probably that was all inflated. I'm still looking for the numbers of how many both sides have been captured. We don't have those numbers because neither one wants to give us a number, how many people have been captured on both sides. But the idea of the numbers of casualties are small compared to the big war. These are small numbers. They're devastating for the people at the front who are being killed and their families back home, certainly. But I was just saying that's the modern warfare. We've gone through this procedure, and certainly the Russians have gone through it with Zinke boys and their losses in Syria, and of course America's done it in Vietnam, and then of course following on with Iraq and then Afghanistan. We've gotten used to casualties in small numbers being horrible. Well, we're looking at casualties. That's a good thing. You don't fight wars without casualties. I mean, of course, the Weinberg doctrine is you don't fight wars, you don't win. I mean, good idea. Let's not do that, But you can't control the situation always. But I'm so used to thinking in this kind of offensive, to do a major offensive, you've got to have a lot of stuff. And I like your line, Frank, that if you don't actually practice this, you don't actually attack across that border, you're not going to be able to do it when you really need to. That's probably true. And as you mentioned Siegfried Sassoon, who I love so well, there's someone who, Bad Jack used to run across the border to just do it because he needed to do it. But he was also setting the example for his men to go, because he knew that when they went across, he had to lead them. He didn't want to shoot them in the back of the head with his pistol. He wanted to have them go for it on their own. And that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the point about, we say that the draconian discipline of the Russians is, it's brutal on the troops. Well, unfortunately, you've got to, it's like, if you disobey me, I'll shoot you. And there is a, Putin himself comes from apparently a mafia kind of upbringing a little bit. And he's cultivated that mentality in the military. You've got these officers who are thuggish, and they, and have no qualms about doing the butcher stuff. And yet, in an offensive kind of operation, there's that brutality towards subordinates. It's very unlikely that they're going to get a fragging situation. Whereas, unfortunately, The amount of times I heard about fragging from people who had been in Vietnam was unfortunate, to put it mildly. You know, there's a lot to be said, unfortunately, for discipline. And certainly the armies of NATO and today, you don't get that. You can't touch troops like you used to.
Serving Nitsa
All
when the Dutch couldn't do it because they didn't want to do it, while the French Foreign Legion called in the shell on themselves. That's the difference. Yeah.
All right, Mark, do you have any comments about all this, Mark?
A question that you mentioned a Ukrainian police officer who was killed by a car bomb.
Yeah.
And was that he had been collaborating with the Russians, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, why isn't there more of this?
It's going on. I beg to differ with Frank about the issue of, well, first of all, there is more of these kind of incidents happening in at least publicized. Again, the provenance, who did it, etc. Who the hell knows?
Well,
but
don't
forget
that Berdyansk was where the Marines landed, and a lot of collaboration in the Kherson area made the whole success story of the Russians possible. And that guy may have been responsible for the lack of defenses on the coastline there, because that landing was absolutely critical to taking Mariupol and also Popsana, because they're the same guys.
Right. Well, the guy he was assassinated in the Donetsk Oblast. But yeah, you got that other issue that Frank raises about the story we heard. I mean, the Washington Post has a good account of this in those very good articles that they did about the origins, the sort of intelligence aspects of the war. Where they talk about there's a whole bunch of folks, including that's one of the reasons why Zelensky fired his buddy from his hometown, who he'd put in charge of intelligence, and he fired the guy because there were all these examples of people who basically betrayed the Ukrainians in the south. And particularly, they were given warning, they didn't blow up certain bridges, stuff like that. But let me just, I have to differ. There's all these accounts. Again, it's hard to figure out who's telling the truth. They recently were just publicizing these memoirs, probably get published in English, by this airborne soldier who defected, Filyatev. And, basically he's talking about, essentially the breakdown of discipline within the Russian, rifle companies. And you see examples of that. And you see examples that they report about, outright, sort of the equivalent of fragging in the operations. And again, who knows how true that is? The same thing with the Ukrainians. You see the same kind of breakdown of will to fight, resisting to go into action on the Ukrainian side. Let me just go through this stuff quickly. This is from today. Now, as you can see, the Poles and the Czechs have agreed to protect the airspace of Slovakia. And they're receiving F-16s. Interesting. And probably turning the MiG-29s over to the Ukrainians once they have that transformation. Kazakhstan. Now, this is another interesting thing. They were seeing reports that Kazakhstan was sending weapons to the Ukraine. All right? That was a separate story that some journalists had come across, that they were actually sent they're an ally of Putin, yet weapons were being sent to the Ukraine. Then you have this question of underwater drones. This constant input of Western technology. Now, there's a picture on a website, pro-Russian website, of basically a draft commissioner getting beat up in the street in some Ukrainian town, and the guy runs away. The guy punches him out, leaves him in the street. See his cell phone flung as he's punched out, and then you see this guy running down the street because the guy tried to, forcibly call up his draft, like, where's your draft card, so to speak. So you got stuff like that going on, within Ukraine, and in Russia too, by the way. Although what's interesting about these mobilizations of these new troops is it's moving west into the areas where there's been less traditional enlistment of contract soldiers. Well, in other words, the more affluent areas of Euro-Russia. Now, look at this. Russia has blocked an agreement in the UN aimed at bolstering the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Russia has increased the intensity of its attacks in the Donetsk area east of eastern Donbass. That's sort of interesting because that was amazing. You're right, Frank. That was sort of an interesting little photo of the artillery barrage. I'm going to have to track that more. That was an interesting source to stumble across. Then they're trying to. Now this is all about Zaporizhia. So this is actually receiving a lot of attention in the international community. The fact that they could have a spillover, a Chernobyl type accident down there, receiving a lot of attention. And here, look at this. Saturday, claims on Saturday came amid concerns about the potential for a radiation leak. Russian forces fired on areas just across the river from the complex, and Russia said Ukrainian shells were hitting a building where the nuclear fuel is stored. 17 Ukrainian shells hit the plant over the past day, with 4 striking the roof of a building that stored nuclear fuel. That's the Russians saying that happened. And look at this. They're saying Russian Grad missiles and artillery shells hit the cities of Nikopol and Makhanets. So remember we were showing that corridor, so to speak, to the western side of where this nuclear power plant is. And that's where you have the possibility of collateral damage coming in from return fire by the Ukrainians. Here you have this question of the silos. We started this whole thing off with that. This question of food exports coming out of the area. Now there's assault on Bakhmut. Not many casualties. 2 dead. 2 were killed in Russian fighting on Bakhmut. Now, this is the important thing on the 25th. The Russian presidential administration increased the strength of the armed forces by 140,000 men. And how he's going to do that, unclear. Russia will attempt to fill this with increased allocation from recruiting more volunteer contract soldiers or increasing the annual targets of the conscription draft. And will this indeed make up... What's this going to be in terms of force structure? I don't know. And here you got
all of everybody in the rock bands. That would be 140,000.
Yeah, now here it's interesting. I had never a black Ukrainian. Wow. So a guy who had fled and established himself in Budapest. It looks like he's from Guinea, from Africa. Now here you have the refugees. Okay, now this is sort of interesting. 50,000 Ukrainian refugees in the UK could be made homeless next year. And fears are mounting that the government's Home for Ukraine scheme will unravel next month when the refugees' initial 6-month placements with hosts end without alternative accommodation. That's a problem. Dell has stopped operating in Russia. Putin has signed a decree allowing the Ukrainian passport holders who have entered Russia since Moscow's offensive to live and work in the country indefinitely. Interesting. Now let's see what occurred in the past few hours here. Some of this repeats itself, of course, as we know. So, again, this issue of what's going on with this nuclear reactor near Zaporizhia. The Russians have turned the whole nuclear power plant into a military base. And Lord knows if something happens there, all hell's going to break loose.
The end of the world. It's terrible.
Yeah, it really is. It'll.
No, because they keep saying that these things won't be breached. If they were hit by a rocket, by one of those things that wipes out a train station, or just by Russian ammunition being stored near them and it blows up, and you knock out the containment of one of those reactors, then you're going to have a major crisis. But you don't have anybody to deal with the crisis.
Right.
You got an exhausted crew. And you're not going to import them in from Russia, and the Ukraine can't send them in, so you can't even send in people to inspect. So you've got no control system based there.
Now, look at
Even
this.
if it's not a serious breach, it's going to be a serious breach.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be absolutely terrible. I mean, imagine what the news will be like, because a plume of that type is obviously going to spread around the world. Now, here the Austrian Chancellor is today called on the EU to separate electricity prices from those of gas to keep them from rising further due to the war in Ukraine. And again, we've talked about this. This has been a sort of Achilles heel politically in Europe. Now look at this. Russia claimed its forces struck motor shops at the Motorsek factory in the Okay, so it's not a nuclear. That's in Zaporizhia. More Russian bombardments. The United States called out the obstructionism of Moscow on the NPT treaty. And so that these are things that America is going to politically raise the temperature on. And here we see the accusations back and forth. Nothing strikes me as we've just more or less gone through those. These are the news stories. Well, that's it. So those are the news stories. Now, there is something that I wanted to show from the Times that does deal with sort of the issues that we were talking about earlier. And
well, I got one thing to point out.
Yeah.
At the UN, Russia vetoed the Security Council's resolution to, I don't know, condemn them for something. I think it's the Zaporizhia factory. But what was significant is that India voted against Russia. They didn't abstain. That's a big deal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is from the 26th, so this gets into this issue of the offensive. This was a sort of a think piece written by Kramer, Cooper. These are all foreign correspondents. So, they're fighting along a 1,500 miles front. Is this stalemate going to be there forever? And what's going to happen to break it? So, but here you get into the questions we've been raising for weeks. Ukraine has greater incentive to try to avoid it with potentially risky maneuvers as early as this fall, before the rainy season turns the countryside into Rasputia, or energy shortages and soaring costs undermine European support. Now, what does Michael Coffin say? It's risky.
Yeah.
Yeah, goddamn right it's risky. If it fails, the outcome could affect external support. On the other hand, Kyiv likely sees this as a window of opportunity, beyond which lies the uncertainty of a protracted war against a Russian army that has had time to entrench. And from the Ukrainian perspective, this cannot go on indefinitely, because the Russians are in control of much of their southern coastline. They're cratering their economy, and the Russians will solidify political control of the areas they have under their control in terms of population. Now, what is Putin facing? Well, I don't know. It's an interesting question. What is the political pressure he's facing? I think, and this is the conclusion of the analyst, Putin will ignore those calls for negotiations and settle on a strategy of plotting offense designed to exhaust and kill Ukrainian forces. The latest evidence came on Thursday when the Kremlin published his order increasing the size of the army by 140,000 troops to 1.15 million. So he's preparing for a long-running war, but not necessarily a large-scale draft that would mark a major escalation and perhaps prompt a domestic backlash. And yes, expectations that it will last by Christmas or this will end by next spring are misguided. And again, the question of what will happen politically in the United States. So I wanted to throw that out because, here you have the straight press arguing the kind of dilemmas that we've been talking about, except, of course, a well-resourced piece with quotes from senior officials. Stage-managed elections to justify annexation could come as early as next month, putting additional time pressure on Zelensky to launch an offensive. But military analysts say there is a disconnect between Ukrainian civilian leaders pressing for a major victory and military leaders who want to ensure they have sufficient troops and combat power before conducting a major offensive. And that is a question. Do they have indeed sufficient combat power. Who knows? I am not sure. Um, and a military offensive needs to be based on conditions of the battlefield, not in the political arena. So they're talking about the deep war that they've been doing since they got these new weapon systems hitting in weapons depots, bases, command posts, and troop positions deep into the occupied territory, including the Crimea. And here's interesting. Now, they got armored vehicles with mine clearing attachments that could be used in the ground advance. That's not going to be more than a couple of brigades that you have that. I mean, I think it's, 1 or 2 battalions worth of vehicles they got. So, anyway, so that, I mean, I'm just saying, like, these guys don't analyze what they're actually getting. And, how's Putin going to deal with this? So he could ignore any criticism, true. Instead, he insists his forces are advancing eastern Ukraine step by step. And then Zelensky has broad support for continuing war. 92% of Ukrainians are confident in military victory. And he was going to, interesting. With the decision on an attack in the south looming, Zelensky has taken pains to show unity with his generals. He denied rumors he was going to dismiss the commander Valery Zaluzhny. We work as a team, blah, blah, blah. So, anyway, I throw that out because here's the straight press talking about things that we've been going in excruciating detail over for weeks.
Right. Good. Good.
Any conclusions?
Well, this is not a conclusion, but I do have information from our previous discussion when we were talking about who are, I'm sorry, I just erased my own link here. We talked about who were the Gagos, the language group. You remember?
Yeah, I remember. What were they?
Yeah. They are the people who live in South Moldova, and they're a Turkic language group apparently.
What?
They're a Turkic language group that got sort of marooned in South Moldova, and there are a few tens of thousands of them. That's who that group was. The Gagauz, Gauz. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because Erdogan, interestingly, backed Zelensky on the actions. The need to take back Crimea, and really the only reason he's doing that is because the Tatars used to control it.
Yeah.
And there is a Tatar minority. Well, they were actually displaced people. They were displaced from Crimea by Stalin, but that would be another reason for
More factor for them. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's another, something else to look into. But as far as conclusions as to what's going on, well, I think I made it clear that settling down for an attritional kind of war is not in the interest of Ukraine. Absolutely not. And there is reserves that the Russians have got. And as that woman said in the very beginning, they're not using all their technological capabilities, although I think they are overmatched in many ways. I mean, the Russians, that is. And the thing is that any offense or defense, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if your jammers don't work or your air defense doesn't work, things start to unravel fast if if the other side exploits that problem and exploits that potential weakness by taking them out. And it is possible for Ukraine to do an offense, but this argument, and that was interesting where it said that Zelensky may have been, there may have been a suggestion he was going to get rid of this guy Zaluzhny. It's possible that guy is arguing that I haven't got enough combat power, I haven't got this and that. Well, every day he doesn't have the combat power, Russia is reinforcing the Kherson Oblast.
Right. So
that's not clever. It's not clever at all. And I mean, we can go back to many examples in history, particularly World War I, where everybody's waiting until they got, the nth degree of support. And then all that artillery had zero effect on the actual defenses. And what happened? It was a disaster because it wasn't planned properly and what have you. But, where nobody wants to Somme on the Ukrainian side because, a disaster like that would not go down well. But as to Ted's point about casualties, it's a population of 40 million. I mean, France in 1914 was what, maybe 30?
Yeah, about 40
So,
million.
yeah. So, you know, it's easy for me to say,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you can take casualties, and if the will is there, but then what? Then what? Then you've got a particularly vicious kind of war. Perhaps we don't want that. We, the United States, don't want that. And by the way, the strongest asset that Ukraine has are women's private parts, actually, in the United States, because it's going to be the Roe v. Wade thing that's going to get the Democrats through this midterm. And that's incredible, because even though nobody gives a crap about Ukraine, that will determine whether, Biden can continue reinforcing it. So it's all weird. It's all very weird.
Well, the lack of focus on the Republican side of the political, well, there's no political debate, but the political discussion. The American defense is not even on the table anymore. It's now all about whether we believe the last election was fake or not, and whether we should restore the man to his glorious position. And all these guys who committed, dozens and dozens, hundreds of candidates across the country were committed in the primaries, and most of the ones on his side, or nearly his side, won their races on the Republican side. So you've got one Democrat, one Republican, and in many of these states, the Republicans are going to win, and you're going to lose the control of the election system. But more importantly, they're not talking about Ukraine. They're not talking about national defense. I mean, they talk about the border, the southern border. What are you going to do? You're going to build the wall again. But they don't even say that anymore, because they know nobody else is going to pay for it. So you're stuck in a position where you've got one party with no positions except to restore the old election, and another party with all kinds of great arguments, and war on its hands, and an economic crisis which it's struggling to solve, working hard to solve, and looking to the future 10, 20 years out, but things aren't going to show up next week in your paycheck. And that's a problem for a lot of Americans who are voting, who need money. I was just listening to this morning about New York. One of the tremendous crises in New York is simply the housing crisis, and then the crisis for schools. The fact that many of the schools cannot house the students who are going to be assigned to them this fall, or have been assigned to them this fall. And what are you going to do about it? Well, the mayor has got a problem, and they talk about it, but who's going to pay for it? You're not going to tax the billionaires to pay for it, and you've got to do something about it. But what was it? I think is it Florida? I heard the statistic today that Florida is 46th on teacher pay in the country. 46th on the list, down 46. Now, yet people move to Florida, but just imagine the educational problems that Florida has because of that. And Crisp has now chosen the head of the teachers union to run with him against the governor of Florida. Well, considering how much people hate teachers on the right wing, I'm not sure that's a great decision. We'll see. Anyway.
Well, you're right. And what's going on in Europe, economically, it's, as we saw in those slides, I mean, the pressures are going to build, starting with Bulgaria, Hungary, and Italy.
Yeah.
Bulgaria has just made going against the sanctions and starting to talk to Gazprom again. So they're as bad as Orban in
the Hungarians have already rebelled. They've already said they're going to rebel.
Yeah, exactly. So this could start to cascade in the wrong direction for us. And you mentioned that the Democrats are not talking about Ukraine much at all, actually. So it's not even on anybody's radar at all. And so and by the way, the military it's starting to backtrack a bit. It was interesting, that MOD thing from the Brits saying, well, we don't know what's going to happen now that they're being reinforced. The Russians are being reinforced with these the Third Army Corps, which is different from what they've been saying before. So it's like, oops. And I mean, I'm not confident in Milley and the Joint Chiefs. I'm just not. I don't think they want this to be beyond their king, because we just do not have a military that can handle this at all.
That I don't agree with at all. I mean, I think that the Joint Chiefs are, they think in grand strategic terms, and to them, reinforcing any way to weaken Russia by having a proxy power fight, and they got a good one in Ukraine. It's sort of like they've got guys who will fight and fight well, that they can send weapons to. So, and I look forward. I'm going to be talking to people in the Joint Chiefs in the next couple of weeks, so I'm going to be curious to pick their brains on this. But Ted,
I'm not confident in them at all.
Well, Ted, I was very happy that you were able to establish the origins of that term "Gaga." I thought it was like followers of Lady Gaga or something like that. And yes, Frank, sometimes you do sound like Cantorek. That was the person that Paul Baumer, that was the school teacher in All Quiet on the Western Front. But I have to say that everybody did a great job with Johan Norberg a week ago.
Yeah, that was
I thought.
Yeah, I listened to that. He was very, very good. He really was. If you can do him again, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll get Johan again. But it just showed me the importance of all of us hammering away at this subject for the past months.
You know our stuff. You learn our stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because we could have a really good discussion with Johan, who indeed is a genuine expert of the Russian armed forces. So I think he had a lot of fun. He didn't portray the secret of Swedish meatballs, which I really wanted to do.
Didn't get that.
I didn't get that out of him. He said his grandma taught him, but he's not going to tell. But I think overall, he really was terrific. I thought that was a good job everybody did. Congratulations to everybody on that one.
Where's the recording on that?
I think I sent that out.
Yeah, Ken did as well.
Yeah, Kenny Aaron did. Go to YouTube, Mark, and go to Going Viral Combine, GV Combine, and you'll see Johan is on there, his latest acquisition on there on that particular website. But listen, let me sign off now. We got a lot accomplished. We didn't have as many people on as I thought we'd have. But anyway, I thought it was good to go over the past week. I think it's been the first time we've gone 9 days. Boy, that was a lot of ground to cover. But I guess the more you look at this stuff, unfortunately, it's just degenerated into this terrible blood slogging match between these guys, and it's terrible. I'm sure it's going to be like, you think of the fictions that are going to come out of this war, the art. Oh my God, what a horrible mess for all these folks. Anyway, on that note, let me bid everybody a good adieu, and I'm going to stop the recording. And
thank you, Jim, for getting that last thing with these.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, guys. All right, take it easy.